And the first questions relate your interest on social media. You started from the beginning with social media use overall, but then moved to the academic profession. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. First of all, good afternoon to everybody. And thank you to Juliana for involving me in this very interesting webinar series. I'm glad to share my professional background, my professional expertise with all of you, especially to those who are specifically interested in the social media research. Okay, just to answer to the first question, how did my interest in social media start? Well, actually it was almost 10 years ago now. It was 2011 or so, if I remember well, and it started all by chance because I was intrigued, I was interested in investigating social media from an educational perspective. I had started to use Facebook for my personal use in 2008, and in the early 2000 years, social media research was still in its beginning. So we decided to analyze how Facebook groups were being used by groups of teachers in Italy, and specifically how they could be used, they were being used for professional development. So what we did was to choose a small number of groups, Facebook groups I mean, and to look at what was happening over there. So we chose 3 groups, 2 that were general groups about teachers, teaching, and the other 3 were focused on specific topics of teachers and teaching practices.
So we are seeing there the groups are displayed. They are all Italian teachers group.
Yeah, exactly. They were, I mean, they were and not they are anymore because some of them don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. And yes, they were all Italian groups, so the language was Italian and the teachers were Italian. And what we did was to design a survey tool which was proposed to all the people who were following these groups with a number of questions aimed to see what kind of dynamics, relational, professional dynamics there were happening in these groups, what kind of social capital these people were building, and if there was any kind of relevance in offline activities. So what were the effects of what we are doing online, offline. And the results of this first research study were published in the British Journal of Educational Technology. So to those who are interested in knowing more and to know about more details of the study, I suggest to have a look at this paper, this article. And at the same time, or just shortly afterwards, I started also to investigate about Facebook as an educational tool. When I say Facebook as an educational tool, I mean specifically Facebook as a technology-enhanced learning environment. So not for socialization purposes, not for managing academic issues or things like that, but just as a learning environment. So what I did first was to do a first review of the literature. It was 2012, so there were no many studies available at the time, especially good quality studies. because the research on this topic was in its beginning. So in 2013, we published the first review of the literature about Facebook as a technology-enhanced learning environment. Very few studies. If I remember well, there were 23 or something like that. After 3 years, we did the same study, the same research, but meanwhile, the research about Facebook in education had raised hugely. So when we published our second review in 2016, this time we analyzed more than 100 good quality studies.
In fact, it has, the two papers have a lot of citations.
Yeah.
A high number of citations.
Yeah, that's true. There are many other literature reviews about social media, about Facebook, but for some reason, these were the first ones, and I see that other scholars often refer to this review of the literatures in their studies. And last but not least, after Facebook, I was also, more recently, I was interested in investigating, and so I did something like the two previous literature reviews about other social media, minor social media, as if you want to say so, Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat. To see what's the state of the art about this social media today, always for educational purposes. So this is my latest publication about social media, which was published a couple of months ago.
And are they tools suitable for learning? Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram. What did you discover through your studies?
Well,
the several studies.
I think they are. I have always believed that the social media have a huge potential for education, for learning specifically, not just for informal learning, but also for formal learning in secondary schools, in higher education. But after so many years, I tend to say this. I tend to say the same thing. They are suitable for learning, for education, but they have also many challenges, many pitfalls that must be addressed by teachers, by anyone who intends to use these platforms for learning purposes. In these papers, we have also drafted all the major concerns, the risks, the challenges, and we have also suggested how to focus on these learning tools according through the right pedagogical perspective. So yes, my answer is yes, but of course.
Okay, and then we move on to the next question, which deals with always social media and the concerns for teaching in higher education. Because you entitled one of your articles, "Yes for sharing, no for teaching." In reference to another research results about the use of social media by university teachers, now moving in between higher education in learning activities and teaching as professional activity. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. This was a very demanding and time-consuming research because we started from a survey that Pearson, which is an American publisher, that uses every year with American teachers, higher education teachers, And we wanted to adopt and adapt this tool for investigating the Italian situation. So we did an Italian version of this survey tool, and we tried to reach as many higher education researchers and professors in Italy as possible. This was very demanding in terms of time, of efforts, because our initial aim was to reach the entire scholarly population in Italy, which was crazy, I'm aware now. But at the end, this activity was successful because we were able to reach more than 6,000 people, which is not bad, considering that samples in experimental research are much smaller than that. And in this case, the aim was to see how academic staff use social media for personal, professional, and teaching purposes. When I say personal use, I mean the daily use that everyone does for leisure, for socialization, for getting information from social media and things like that. For professional use, we mean any kind of activity which is strictly related to our professions, our jobs. So to build networks with colleagues, to get feedback from them and things like that. While for teaching use, we mean any kind of use related to social media which is done for education purposes. So the aim, the broad aim of this research was to see if there was any relationship among these three kinds of uses. And what we found was that academics tend to use social media mostly for personal and professional use and much less for teaching use. So we also find that there is a correlation between personal and professional use, but there is at least a very weak correlation between the two first uses and the teaching use. So we found at the end that academics are more prone to use social media for personal professional use and much less prone to use them for teaching, for a number of reasons, because one of the other aims of the study was also to investigate the factors that encourage and discourage the use of social media in academia for teaching. And we saw that there are cultural factors, pedagogical reasons, the lack of support of from the institution, the lack of best practices, many reasons behind this resistance to use social media. Well, the research was done 5 years ago now, so I don't know if things have changed in the meantime. I know that I received mails from other scholars that this study was replicated or is under replication in other countries. So I think that will be interesting also to see differences or similarities between our Italian sample and other samples from other countries.
So this is a suggestion for further research. So it's very interesting because mainly after 2010, there was a sort of hype relating the use of social media. But in your study, it comes out that even if the scholars were more and more using these systems, they were careful about introducing them in their teaching activity, as if there was something to care about when coming to the pedagogical relationship with the students. So this is very interesting for further research. And now, regarding your research, I have another question relating, I mean, you meanwhile have become an expert on social media studies, and you had to started interacting with other scholars on the use of Facebook and overall social media. But then your interest moved to academic social networks. Can you firstly explain us a little bit about this topic, what academic social networks are, and why did you move to this research area, and of course, which are your results relating that?
Yes, yes, as you are saying, I started also to be intrigued, to be yes, motivated to see what's going on in academic social networks. I don't know how many of you are familiar with sites like ResearchGate, academia.edu, but they have become for us as scholars tools of our research, like any other kind of methodological, technological tool. Because one of our aims is also to share the knowledge with other people, with other scholars, with the broad public. So these sites have become one of the means through which also to share the results of our scientific activity, as well as to build new relationships, to enlarge our networks of contacts. And I myself, I must say that I received invitations to participate to conferences or to other research projects that came from ResearchGate, for instance, because people send me emails or send me messages offering to do some kind of collaboration. So I was very interested in seeing the potential and the challenges or pitfalls, also in this case, of these academic social network sites for my own profession and for the scholarly professions.
So, sorry, Stefania, you moved from teaching as professional activity to research as professional activity.
Exactly, yes, that's right, because I wanted to see how these tools may help professional development, so lifelong learning also for scholars, for academic staff. So I started to be very much interested in professional learning, professional development, and I thought that studying these kind of platforms could be an interesting perspective to see how these platforms may serve these needs of professional learning. So what I did with a colleague from the University of Florence, but also with Juliana, was to investigate the most important academic social network sites, which are ResearchGate and academia.edu, according to a theoretical perspective which we elaborated together, that consider academic social network sites and the socio-technical systems, specifically designed and implemented for scholarly communication and collaboration activities. So we proposed a framework of analysis, a three-level framework of analysis that considers the socioeconomic layer of these sites, a techno-culture layer, and a network scholar layer, according to a micro, and medio and perspective. We did this kind of investigation also in terms of literature reviews, both in English and in Spanish. Unfortunately, the two papers are both in English, but who knows that in the future something new may come up also in Spanish. And yes, this was the starting point, how I started to take care also of professional learning in social media.
Okay, so you talk about networked social technical systems because it's like a three-layered system where the macro dimension relates to ownership, governments, business model, because you started to understand that there was not only the usage, but these were very complex socio-technical systems. You spent a lot of time studying, for example, ResearchGate. Can you tell us a little bit about ResearchGate as a platform? The interesting things you discovered about that platform for the researchers.
Yes. ResearchGate is a very peculiar academic social network site because it has its own set of metrics, for instance. Every scholar has his or her own RG score, which is a number that sums up all kinds of activities, of benefits that every scholar has in his or her profile. It's a very sophisticated platform because it gives a number of options in terms of activities can be done. There are forums for answers to questions, ask for help, looking for new collaboration and things like that. So at the end, after spending so much time on it, I must say that ResearchGate is a very powerful tool for professional learning because for a number of reasons. First of all, because you can get easily access to others' publications, great literature, description of research projects, any kind of research material that one may be interested in. But it is also a powerful tool for connecting people together, to contact easily someone who is working in the same area as you are. If you want to look for a new collaborator, new ideas. So I think that it's very powerful in this sense, but it is also, it's not commercial in the usual meaning because it's free. It's a for free platform, but if you want to use some specific features, you have to pay for them.
This is more, it's clear even in regard with academia.
Exactly. So this is tricky because we are used to think that everything should be free. And also because our ministers of research and education pay a lot of money to support our research. So many people don't like the idea that if you have to pay to use these services. Another tricky issue is that the copyright is not always respected, so some people tend to make publicity available for free, publications that instead need to be paid for. And so what I think it's more interesting of platforms like ResearchGate is that they challenges the traditional culture, the scholarly culture we are used to. So there are pros and cons, as always, when we talk about social media, and so we have also to be very careful when we decide to share the results of our research on these commercial platforms.
Yes, sure, because there is an issue with data, because we put our data in there and somebody is using this data for purposes we are not fully aware of. And this is when we come to the fourth question, relating the potentials and risks. You talk a little bit about the potentials, but what about the risks in the social networks as professional environments for development in the academic profession, and particularly regarding big and open data? And also the fact that these platforms are being used for doing research themselves, also Twitter. So let's elaborate a little bit more on that, the pitfalls of big and open data in this platform.
Well, one of the risks, one of the major risks is to share our research data for free to someone who makes money with our data. This is the major risks, one of the major risks, because as I was saying, ResearchGate or Academia.gate are commercial platforms. So they use our data, the data that scholars share put on these platforms, for reasons that are not always clarified. So this is one of the first problems we are dealing with. Another one is related to what are the outcomes of our research products. I mean, we are talking about open science for a long time now, and me and Juliana, I think, strongly believe in the values of open science, because we are paid for our job and we are obliged, we have a mandatory duty, which is to share the results of the knowledge we are producing through our research. So it's not easy to understand how our data, how our research products are used or reused by others, for what purposes, and so on. One of the aspects of this broad issue we investigated was the open data set, and what kind of practices are developing around open data sets in both in academic social network sites like ResearchGate, but also on open data repositories, which are specific websites who collect open data set. So we did a first study a couple of years ago, and we investigated how open data practices in education and technology research were, what were they doing. So what we did was to analyze a small number of these open data repositories, and to see if there was any kind of social life around this open data set. By social life, we mean if these open data set are read, shared, or cited by other scholars, by other groups of scholars. And we did this taking into account a number of metrics that these platforms provide. And I think that we were able to collect a number of first interesting results. This is research which is also still under work. Juliana specifically is working hard on this topic, and we started together, but our ways in some way split, and now we are doing we are focusing on different topics. To reply to your last question about the issues related to big data, yes, this is a very big issue. Big data are a huge issue, no matter what the area of the investigation is, but specifically, if we consider big data or in social media, well, one of the first things to say is that it's not easy. It is not easy at all to access to the data, the big data on social media. There are a number of technical issues, methodological issues, ethical issues. And in this study, which is entitled Big Data for Social Media, Learning Analytics, Potentials and Challenges, what we did was to provide a number of indications, a number of also suggestions to take care about big data in social media learning. And specifically, we investigated the state of the art of the time. The paper was published in 2016. And the research in this sector was at the beginning. And I think that we were successful in drawing a first picture of the situation, the current state of the art of the time, and also to give some preliminary indications for further research. I just also want to say that it's not easy to do social media research.
Yes, you are now. Yes, yeah. Sorry, you are now moving to a new topic, where a learning phenomenon like the Holocaust in the memory, in the history, and as part of a cultural heritage that triggers potential skills like living in the complex multicultural contemporary societies, a part of the fact of being aware and well informed about the history, and you will like focus in this topic and analyze what happens on social media. But doing research on social media looks like be challenging. Can you tell us a little bit about what happens when extracting and using this type of data, problems of privacy and methodological issues you found?
Yes.
Or you are finding because you are starting? Yes.
Yes, right. There are a number of issues which are very important to consider if someone wants to do some kind of social media research, which are true for any kind of topic. Privacy and security is one of the big issues of big data in general and of social media research as well, because there are many ethical issues which are involved in dealing with this big data. We need to protect the privacy of people who are participating in social media, so we need to anonymize, to remove names of people from the data we collect. we have to take into consideration a number of measures to protect them, their identity, so that they can also be safe and secure in giving away their personal data. But in addition to this, there are also a number of technical issues, because until a couple of years ago, it was more easy to do research on Facebook, for instance, because there were many less protection of the data of people. There were a number of API, which are technological, yes, devices to access this data. Today, it has become very much complicated. Social media platforms tend to place many restrictions on the number of data that scholars, also for research purposes, can access to. For some of these platforms, like for instance Instagram, there is no API anymore. So scholars are starting to be a bit worried about the real possibilities to use social media data for doing their research.
So it's becoming more and more like conflicting and contradictory, because whereas in research are asking to us to become more and more open and practices open data in a broader context of open science, platforms are becoming more and more closed, giving access to private data to a very few people, to the servers where data is stored. And even though very bad things are happening, if we recall very, very recent issues. So this is something to reflect about in the future.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, as we are saying, more people tend to use these services, and less possibilities are allowed to research unless you pay for them, because some of these services sell not users' data, because it sounds very bad said like this, but they allowed selected groups of scholars to access the data, and this is not good. This is not positive.
It's not a fair practice.
It's not a fair practice, absolutely, and it's not a positive for also for small groups of researchers who don't have much money to buy this data, and yes, things are getting very much complicated today.